Survival games are simple. You punch a tree, build a house, and try not to die. But lately, some greedy publishers are trying to ruin them with battle passes and microtransactions. Here are 25 awesome survival games that are actually worth your time, along with an honest look at the corporate garbage trying to ruin some of them.
I'll be honest, I wasn't sure a sequel could top the original. The first Subnautica had this specific feeling of isolation that's hard to replicate, and I was half expecting this one to sand off all the edges that made it special. It didn't. Subnautica 2 keeps the same core loop. You crash on an alien ocean planet, you have nothing, and now you have to figure out how to not drown. The fear is still very much intact. Deep water, strange sounds, things brushing past you in the dark that you cannot identify and probably don't want to. The crafting and base building feel smoother this time. The new biomes are genuinely interesting to explore, and the underwater environments are some of the best looking in the genre. It's in early access right now, but it already feels like a full game in most of the ways that matter. If you like the original, this is an easy call. If you've never played a Subnautica game at all, I'm honestly a little jealous. You get to experience both of them fresh. Sons of the Forest does something most survival games don't bother with. It actually tries to be a horror game at the same time, and it mostly succeeds. You crash land on an island looking for a missing billionaire, and almost immediately, something in the forest makes a sound that you did not ask to hear. The building system is one of the best in the genre. You place individual logs, you can build actual structures with real geometry, and it feels satisfying in a way that most games just don't pull off. Your AI companion Kelvin is also surprisingly useful. You give him simple tasks, and he just goes and does them, which is a rare quality in an AI companion that isn't also constantly in your way. The cave systems add a layer of dread that the open forest doesn't quite match, and there are enough story threads scattered around that you'll want to keep exploring just to see what connects. It's not a perfect game, some systems feel underbaked even post-launch, but between the atmosphere, the building, and the general weirdness of what's living in those trees, it earns its spot. The actual gameplay loop in Ark is genuinely great. That part has always been true. You wake up naked on a beach, you tame dinosaurs, you eventually ride a T-Rex around like it's completely normal, and somewhere in there, 100 hours disappear. The Unreal Engine 5 upgrade in Ascended is real and meaningful. It looks significantly better than Survival Evolved did, the environments have actual visual detail now, and some of the creature designs hold up in a way the original's graphics never quite let them. The dinosaur variety is massive. The progression from stone tools to powered structures feels rewarding, and building your base while managing a growing stable of creatures has a kind of organized chaos that I find weirdly satisfying. Here's what you should know going in though. Snail Games, the publisher, has drawn heavy criticism for how they've handled this release. They shut down the original Survival Evolved servers, which effectively pushed the player base onto Ascended, a game they had to buy again. Then on top of that, they started selling specific dinosaurs and structural pieces behind paid DLC passes. The community has not been quiet about it. The game itself is good. The decisions around it are a separate and ongoing conversation. Dying Light 2 is at its best when you stop thinking about the objectives and just move. The parkour system is fluid enough that navigating the city becomes its own thing. Jumping between rooftops, grabbing ledges, sliding under gaps, and the traversal feel alone is enough to justify a lot of hours. The day-night cycle does real work here. During the day, zombies are slow and manageable, almost background noise. At night, they get faster, more aggressive, and they start coming out in numbers that make you genuinely reconsider whatever you were doing. The melee combat has weight to it, weapons degrade over time, and the modification system gives you options for how you want to approach fights without making any single build feel mandatory. The story has some interesting moments, but it's not the main attraction. What keeps you playing is the movement, the tension of being caught outside after dark, and the slow process of turning an unfamiliar city into somewhere you know how to survive. It's a bigger, messier game than the first, but the core of what makes it fun is still very much intact. State of Decay 2 is a community management game wearing a zombie game costume, and once you understand that, it clicks. You're not just keeping yourself alive, you're keeping a group of survivors alive, tracking resources, managing relationships, deciding who goes on supply runs, and what happens when they don't come back. The permadeath system does something clever. It makes you care about characters in a way that's hard to explain until it happens. Someone you've been playing for 30 hours makes a mistake, gets overwhelmed, and that's it. They're gone. You feel it. The Juggernaut edition is the version to get. It comes with all the content that's been added over the years and runs in a state that doesn't feel like it's actively working against you. The visuals are rough by current standards, and the AI has its moments, but the core loop of building up your community, expanding your base, making hard calls about limited resources, it's more compelling than the production values would suggest. One of those games that's easier to appreciate once you've actually sat with it for a while.
We'll have a better chance of survival together.
Enshrouded is the game I kept describing to people as what if Valheim had snappier combat and a more hands-on crafting system. You're in a fantasy world covered in a mysterious fog called the Shroud, and being inside it too long will kill you, which does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of building exploration tension without needing to throw enemies at you constantly. The voxel-based building system is flexible enough that people have built some genuinely impressive structures, and the progression through different crafting tiers feels earned rather than arbitrary. The combat has a satisfying feel to it, dodging, using skills, switching between playstyles depending on how you've built your character. You also unlock NPC craftsmen as you progress who expand what you can make, which gives the world a sense of growing infrastructure over time. The early access launch was one of the cleaner ones I've seen in the genre, and the development cadence since then has been steady. If you want your survival game to lean harder into the fantasy RPG side of things, this is a solid choice.
Can take back a kingdom.
Pacific Drive is not quite like anything else on this list, which is either a selling point or a warning depending on what you're looking for. You drive a station wagon through a supernatural exclusion zone somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and the car is your home base, your storage unit, and your only real companion. You run expeditions deeper into the zone, scavenge parts and resources, repair and upgrade the car, and try to make it back to your garage before things go sideways. The atmosphere is thick. Fog, strange anomalies that bend the rules of physics, radio chatter suggesting something catastrophic happened here and nobody wants to talk about what. The car damage system is genuinely integrated into gameplay. A busted door means less protection from environmental hazards, a failing engine means you might not make it out of a run. It's a slow game by survival standards, more about tension and atmosphere than constant action, but if you're into the aesthetic, PNW wilderness, weird science, that specific kind of creeping dread, this one does something genuinely original with the genre.
Number 2, do not attempt to contain or...
Green Hell takes itself seriously in a way that most survival games don't, and that commitment is both its best quality and the reason it's not for everyone. You're in the Amazon rainforest with basically nothing, and the environment treats that situation as a complete emergency. Infections, parasites, broken bones, starvation, dehydration, and a psychological sanity system that reflects how badly things are going. It's a lot to manage, and the game makes no effort to soften any of it. The crafting is detailed enough that there's a genuine learning curve. Building a proper shelter, treating wounds correctly, identifying which plants are safe to eat, but when you figure something out, you actually feel like you learned something rather than just checked a box. There's also a story mode with a narrative that's decent for the genre, not the main reason to play it, but it gives structure if you want that. If you want a survival game that makes you feel genuinely out of your depth at first and actually capable later, Green Hell earns that experience in a way that more forgiving games can't really replicate.
Sure yet, but it feels that way.
Rust is a social experiment with crafting mechanics, and that's not really an exaggeration. You spawn in with a rock, and your entire first hour is shaped by whether the first player you encounter decides to help you or just hit you with a rock. The progression, going from a campfire and a sleeping bag to a compound with metal walls and auto turrets, is genuinely satisfying, and the player-driven chaos of the world creates stories that no scripted game could produce. It's one of the most purely multiplayer-dependent experiences in the genre, for better and worse. What you should know, Facepunch has been taking significant community backlash recently for monetization decisions that have crossed into gameplay territory. We're talking iron sights that offer better visibility than the default options, camouflage outfits that genuinely reduce visibility in specific biomes, and weapon charm items that the community largely views as unnecessary bloat. In a game where small advantages matter as much as they do in Rust, this has been a sore point. The community's response has been loud and ongoing. It's still one of the most compelling survival games ever made, but it's worth knowing where things currently stand before you jump in.
DayZ invented a genre and then spent years watching that genre move past it, which is a strange position to be in, but there's still nothing quite like what it offers. You spawn in Chernobyl, a large, mostly empty post-Soviet landscape with nothing, and your goal is simply to stay alive. No quest markers, no objectives, no waypoints telling you where to go. The tension of encountering another player is something DayZ does better than almost any game that followed it. You don't know if they're friendly, they don't know if you are.
Those encounters can end in cautious cooperation, tense standoffs, or something much worse. And the unpredictability is the whole point. Finding a working gun and a can of food after a long, rough start feels like a genuine win. The development history has been messy, and the game still has rough edges. But if what you want is pure, unscripted human behavior in a survival setting, the kind of emergent stories that you actually remember years later, DayZ still delivers that in a way that most games with 10 times the budget haven't managed to replicate.
Grounded is a survival game where you've been shrunk to the size of an ant and your backyard is now a legitimate wilderness. Grass blades become dense forest, puddles are lakes, and acorns are basically boulders you have to navigate around. The scale shift is committed and it works. The world feels genuinely large and threatening in ways that feel earned rather than artificially inflated. Spiders in particular are handled in a way that I have complicated feelings about, and the game does include an arachnophobia setting that softens their appearance if you need it, which is one of the more thoughtful accessibility options I've seen in recent memory. The crafting system is well-paced, the building is creative, and the game has a good sense of humor about its own premise without being obnoxious about it. It shines in co-op, up to 4 players, and most people end up playing it that way, though it holds up solo too. Obsidian built something that sounds completely ridiculous on paper and made it work over a full playthrough. That's not easy to do, and it deserves credit for it.
V Rising is a survival game where you play a vampire, which immediately answers the question of what your motivation is. You wake up weak after a long sleep. You hunt animals and humans for blood, you build a gothic castle stone by stone, and you gradually work your way back up to being something genuinely dangerous. The blood mechanic is one of the more clever systems in the genre. Different creatures give you different blood types with different passive bonuses, so you're actively choosing what to hunt based on what you want to get out of it, rather than just whatever's closest. The boss system gives you clear progression targets, and the top-down action combat feels clean and responsive. The base building is solid, the world has a good sense of scale, and the whole thing runs well and looks good without requiring a machine that costs more than a used car. It also launched in a state that didn't feel like an apology, which in early access terms is saying something. One of the cleaner executions of the survival genre in recent years. The long dark strips everything back to the point where the game becomes almost meditative. No enemies with health bars, no base building in the traditional sense, no combat system to master, just you, a crashed plane somewhere in the Canadian wilderness, and the slow process of figuring out how to stay warm and fed long enough to see another day. The cold is something the game communicates genuinely well. You're constantly aware of your temperature, the wind direction, how exposed you are, how far you are from shelter. Getting caught in a blizzard with a failing jacket and no wood is one of the more effectively stressful experiences the genre has to offer, and the game achieves that without any artificial contrivances. The survival sandbox is where most people spend their time, though there's also a story mode called Wintermute if you want a narrative thread to follow. Either way, this is a quieter, slower, more patient game than most on this list. The kind of game that makes you feel something when the sun starts going down and you're not where you need to be.
Valheim is the survival game that convinced a lot of people who don't normally play survival games to give the genre a shot, and it's not hard to see why. You're a Viking dropped into a procedurally generated purgatory, and your job is to defeat a series of ancient bosses to prove yourself worthy of Valhalla. Each boss you kill unlocks new materials and crafting options, which gives the loop a clear sense of forward momentum that keeps things from feeling like you're just grinding in an open field. The sailing system is genuinely satisfying. Building a longship, navigating the ocean, finding new biomes, and the whole thing feels earned by the time you get there. The art style has this soft, foggy quality to it that makes the world feel mythological in a way that's hard to define but easy to notice. The game runs well, the co-op is straightforward to set up, and the development team has been transparent and consistent about updates even when they've been slow. A well-made game that earned its popularity the right way.
No Man's Sky has one of the more interesting second acts in gaming. The launch was rough, I think most people remember that period pretty clearly, but Hello Games kept updating it quietly and consistently for years, until it became something genuinely worth spending time in. You explore a procedurally generated universe, build bases on alien planets, manage resources across multiple systems, and engage with as much or as little of the story as you feel like. The scale is hard to fully communicate, effectively infinite planets, each with different weather, wildlife, atmosphere, and hazards. Some planets are beautiful, some are hostile in ways that feel personal. The amount of content available now versus what shipped in 2016 makes for an uncomfortable comparison for most other developers. It runs well, the multiplayer is low friction if you want to play with someone, and the development team has continued adding content well past the point where most studios would have moved on. If you wrote it off at launch, it's worth another look. Genuinely. Palworld is what happens when someone looks at the creature collecting genre and decides to take it somewhere much weirder. You catch creatures called pals, you use them for combat, but you also put them to work in your base, mining, farming, manufacturing, and somewhere in that loop you end up building an automated factory staffed entirely by creatures that look like they belong in a children's cartoon. It sounds chaotic because it is, but the systems underneath it are more coherent than the concept suggests. The base automation mechanics are genuinely well designed. The creature designs are fun without feeling derivative, and the survival and crafting systems aren't just tacked on as an afterthought. They actually tie into the progression in meaningful ways. The early access launch was one of the biggest in recent memory, which tells you something about the pent-up demand for exactly this kind of game. It has rough edges, unfinished areas, pacing issues, all the standard early access caveats. But the core loop is fun enough that most of that gets overlooked while you're playing it. The Planet Crafter is a terraforming survival game that somehow manages to be genuinely relaxing, which is not a sentence I expected to be writing about a survival game. You land on a barren, lifeless planet, and your job is to make it habitable, slowly raising the oxygen levels, temperature, and atmospheric pressure until the world around you is visibly changing. The game tracks those environmental stats in real time, and watching the planet shift from dead rock to something with actual weather and eventually plant life over dozens of hours is more satisfying than it sounds on paper. There are no enemies trying to kill you, no PvP, no constant threat loop, just the slow, methodical process of changing a world. The crafting and building are simple but well-paced, and the progression gates feel natural rather than artificial. If you want something you can put on after a long day and just exist in without constant pressure, this is one of the better options in the genre for exactly that. Low stakes, long payoff, genuinely chill. Nightingale stands out visually before you even get to the mechanics. The Victorian gas lamp fantasy aesthetic is one of the more distinctive looks in the genre, and the world design leans into it fully. Fog, wrought iron structures, strange folklore-adjacent creatures, that general sense that something just beyond the edge of your lantern is watching you. The core system uses realm cards to travel between procedurally generated biomes, swamps, deserts, forests, mystical spaces, each with different resources and hazards, which gives exploration a sense of variety that a single open world sometimes struggles to maintain. The crafting system has more depth than most survival games, and the building lets you put together structures that actually look impressive rather than just functional. It had a rougher early access launch than the team probably wanted, and some of the systems felt undercooked at release. The updates since then have addressed a lot of that. If you're tired of the standard forest and cave survival setting and want something that looks and feels genuinely different, Nightingale is one of the more interesting directions the genre has gone recently. Quick but important clarification before anything else. There is a mobile game called Frostpunk Beyond the Ice. Avoid it completely. It's a gacha game where you pay real money to buy bed frames and speed up tent construction. I am not making that up. That is a different product from a different company and has nothing to do with what I'm talking about here. The actual Frostpunk 2, the PC and console game, is a city survival strategy game set in a frozen post-apocalyptic world, and it's one of the better entries in that specific niche. You're managing a colony of survivors, keeping them warm, fed, and politically stable enough that they don't turn on each other or on you. The political faction system in this one is more developed than the original. Different groups have competing demands, and navigating those tensions while also keeping the lights on is a genuine and interesting challenge. The atmosphere is bleak in a way that feels purposeful rather than grimdark for its own sake. It's a premium buy-once game with no ongoing monetization, which in the current landscape feels worth stating plainly. One of the more thoughtful survival strategy games in recent memory. Scum is set in a near-future dystopia where convicted criminals are dropped onto an island and hunted for entertainment by a paying audience, which is a premise that does a lot of tonal work immediately. The survival mechanics go deeper than most games in the genre are willing to go. Your character has actual metabolism tracking, vitamin levels, blood sugar, muscle mass, fat percentage, and the game takes all of that seriously in ways that affect how your character performs. It's slower and more simulation-leaning than most survival games, which is either exactly what you're looking for or a reason to close the tab, depending on your preferences. The gunplay is solid for the genre, the world has a good amount of content to engage with across different playstyles, and the moment-to-moment tension of not knowing whether another player is nearby has that same quality that DayZ does at its best. It's been in early access for longer than the community would prefer, and development has been inconsistent in pace, but if you want a survival game that treats the human body as a system worth simulating properly, this is one of the more committed attempts at doing that.
Icarus does something structurally different from most survival games on this list. It's session-based, which is either a clever design choice or a deal-breaker depending on how you normally play. You drop onto an alien planet, complete a mission within a set time frame, and then get extracted. Your character's progression and any items you bring back carry over between sessions, but anything left on the planet when you extract stays there. It removes the problem that a lot of open-ended survival games have where the endgame becomes a formality once you're fully established. In Icarus, every session has a clock, which keeps the tension from fully draining out. The environment is genuinely dangerous. Weather systems can change fast, and getting caught unprepared in a storm can end a run. The missions have enough variety that the format holds up over multiple sessions, and the co-op integration is well handled if you want to run missions with other people. Not the survival game for everyone, but the session structure solves real problems that longer-form games tend to run into.
Medieval Dynasty sits at an intersection of survival game, RPG, and slow-burn life simulator, and how much you enjoy it depends on which of those three things you came for. You're building a village from scratch in a medieval setting, farming, hunting, crafting, recruiting villagers, managing their needs, and expanding your settlement across what eventually becomes multiple generations. The survival mechanics are present, but not particularly punishing, which puts this on the calmer end of the spectrum. What makes it work is how the systems feed into each other. Farming produces food that sustains villagers, villagers build structures, structures unlock new crafting options help you grow faster. It's a loop that rewards patience, and the game is good at creating those moments where you look up and realize you've been playing for 3 hours without noticing. It sounds less exciting to describe than it is to actually play, which is maybe the highest compliment you can give a game in this genre.
Hail, friend. Goodbye.
Conan Exiles drops you into the Exiled Lands, a harsh desert region of the Conan universe with nothing, and then gives you the tools to build something substantial out of it over a long period of time. The building system is one of the deepest in the genre. You can construct everything from a simple outpost to a full fortress with multiple tiers of materials, and the structural flexibility is genuinely impressive. The world has meaningful environmental variety. Desert, jungle, frozen mountains, underground dungeons, and each area has its own resources and threats that make exploration feel worthwhile. The combat is heavier and more deliberate than most survival games, and it's improved considerably over the years. The thrall system, where you knock out NPCs, drag them back to your base, and put them to work, is either entertaining or uncomfortable, depending on your read of it, but it fits the tone of the setting. The game has paid DLC for cosmetic building sets, which has been a consistent criticism, though there's substantial content in the base game without touching any of it.
Siege weapons were introduced in the form of trebuchets.
Raft gives you a tiny wooden platform floating in the middle of the ocean, a hook on a rope, and asks you to take it from there. You use the hook to grab debris floating past, wood, plastic, palm leaves, and you build more raft out of what you collect. That's the whole opening premise, and it works remarkably well as a foundation. The raft grows piece by piece. You add processing stations for fresh water and cooked food, you set up crop plots on the deck, and all of it while managing a shark that has decided your raft is a personal project and will not be dissuaded. The game opens up considerably as you progress. There are islands to visit, story locations to find, and the raft eventually becomes large enough that navigating it becomes its own mild logistical challenge. The co-op is easy to get into and scales well with the number of players. It's not the most mechanically complex survival game on this list, but the central concept is so cleanly designed that it keeps pulling you forward without needing to complicate things unnecessarily. Stranded Deep puts you in a plane crash somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, and then leaves you to sort it out. You wash up near a small island with very little, and the early game has a specific kind of tension that comes from genuinely not having enough. Not enough food, not enough water, not enough materials to feel secure. Finding fresh water and something edible without getting bitten by something territorial are the immediate concerns, and the game handles that opening pressure well. As you explore surrounding islands by raft, the crafting expands and mid-game objectives start to emerge. There are some larger creatures out there that serve as meaningful challenges if you've set up enough of a base to take them on. It's a smaller, more focused experience than most games on this list. No massive open world, no sprawling tech tree, no multiplayer server full of other people making your life interesting or terrible. But there's something honest about that focus. It's not trying to be everything. It just wants to make you feel genuinely stranded, and it does that well enough to earn the hours you'll put into it.
And that's the list of 25 survival games worth your time, corporate warnings included. A few of them have some genuine baggage attached, but the games themselves, mostly, are solid. If something on this list surprised you, or if I missed something you think absolutely deserves a spot, let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want more lists like this, and I'll see you in the next one.